Buddy, welcome to the Lead, Learn, Grow podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Robin. Really nice of you to have me on.
Yeah, so I want to take you back to a long time ago. It kind of hurts me to say it out loud how many years ago it was, but
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
okay, so the World Series, mid 80s, 85-ish, I do
You
believe.
said it.
But take me back to the 1985 World Series. You were a young up and comer major league player, first round draft pick, all the expectations that go with that. And you're in the middle of, you know, the World Series, the Royals and the Cardinals and the I-70 series and the whole world watching you. And you performed at a really, really high level. And I've read some of the things you've said about that, but kind of talk about what were some of the conditions and where were you coming into it and why did things begin to click? Can you just talk about that to get us started?
Sure. First off, I want to share that as a kid, I knew what I wanted. 5 years old, I knew I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I never fathomed playing the World Series, but I always worked and really dedicated my time to being a Major League Baseball player. It wasn't that other things weren't important. I was from a very educated family in California. Um, but playing in a World Series it was just too big an event. It just never crossed my mind. And even when I got to the major leagues, it never crossed my mind. So it was like, okay, at the end of the season, end of September, I'm going home and I'm watching World Series on TV, all the playoffs. And all of a sudden, I found myself, I'm sitting in my locker before game one of the 1985 World Series. I was a starting shortstop for the Royals against the Cardinals, as you mentioned. And with about 20 minutes to go, it was very typical that I would get nervous before a game. And what I would generally do, I'd make myself a sandwich just to try and settle myself a little bit. So 20 minutes before the game one, I'm sitting in my locker, and all of a sudden I get blasted with a massive wave of fear to the point that not only did I not think I could catch a ground ball, I knew for sure that I couldn't catch a ground ball. That's how
Mhm.
paralyzed I was.
Had that ever happened to you before? Not to interrupt, but
Never.
was that the first time something like that had happened?
First time.
Yeah,
First time. Again, very common to get nervous before a game.
sure.
When I wasn't nervous at all, I didn't play well. So it was like, okay, little agitation in the nervous system. Great. I'll be okay. But here, completely paralyzed. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Can I just get my street clothes and go home and watch the game on TV? And I'm thinking, no, I'm the starting shortstop. I got to go. So 20 minutes to be in the dugout for introductions where, they announce your name, you run to the foul line, and, you're seen, they put a camera right in front of your face and you're seen by millions of people all over the world. So I just sat there and I said, man, this is really scary. And instead of making myself a sandwich, I just kind of really sunk into it. Um, and just did my best to get myself in a more settled state. And then I decided, okay, I'll grab my bat, my helmet, my glove, and I walked down the runway into the dugout and I waited for my name to be introduced, of which it was. And what then happened was I went out and I played really the seven best baseball games of my whole life, not just my professional career, but even as an amateur.
Hmm.
And, everything just really slowed down for me. And there was no thinking that was involved. Everything I did was just very fluid and effortless. The timing was great. The ball was coming out of my hand with perfect speed and trajectory. I hit 73 points higher than my career average, had a very high on base percentage. And, literally every single ball at shortstop, and I choose my words very carefully,
Hmm.
every single ball for 7 games hit me right in the sweet spot of my glove. It was a remarkable experience. And there was one play that I like to speak about, and it was a play that anybody on a little league field could go make right now.
Hmm.
And it was a ball that kicked away from our second baseman on a stolen base attempt, kicked away from Frank White into shallow left center field. And I ran after it, picked it up, wheeled and turned and threw back to second base. No big deal at all. And it was a perfect throw. Again, no big deal. But in the moment, I was like, wow, I feel like I could have kicked it to him.
Hmm.
it was like a force completely overtook me in that series. And I was just in my own little world. Even before the game, there was just so many media around, and the clubhouse in St. Louis was very kind of a smaller clubhouse. You could barely even see your teammates, and it was very different than playing during the regular season. And I felt kind of all alone in the clubhouse, and then I'd go on the field, and I just kind of go stretch by myself, and just kind of was kind of all taking it in. But I was just in a different state naturally. I had no idea what was happening. But when the game began, I was flawless. And the only thing that went wrong was I missed a suicide squeeze in my first at bat. Um, John Tudor threw me a fastball that ran away, and I really didn't know. We didn't have the scouting reports in those days. I didn't know he had a two-seam fastball, and I just wasn't in a good position to stay with it and get it on the ground. But other than that, I didn't do anything wrong. So it was a zone experience, as I call it. And I got the help of a nice call at first base in Game 6 by an umpire that I called the umpire's call that changed my life. Don Denkinger really missed one at first base that really helped us score 2 runs in the bottom of the ninth of Game 6 to take it to Game 7, which we won 11-0. So it was just an amazing experience of not having to think, everything just slowing down and processing really well, and it was a beautiful thing. Just happened by chance.
Well, what does it mean? I'm going to come back to this for a second, but for folks who, maybe haven't been in the athletics world, or they when you talk about being in the zone, like it's almost like one of those things that you know it when it's happening, but what is it really? Like what do you think it means to be in the zone?
Well, let me describe, give an experience, a common experience for someone who's not an athlete or musician.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty common for someone to kind of have driven home from work, and all of a sudden they're at home. They don't really remember anything about the drive.
Mm.
They're just there, although they know they were driving safely. And so that's the zone for someone who hasn't played sports.
Hmm.
The zone for an athlete is when just things really, really slow down, and there's no thought process that really has to come into play. The body just goes on autopilot, and it's not that other things aren't important, because you're in the sales world. Well, obviously there are a lot of steps that are really required to be a successful salesperson, and but um, in the sports world, all the muscles just start to fire synchronistically because of how information is moving through the brain. And the brain is the operating system of our whole life, and it's the operating system of the muscles in sports. They're not just the muscles in sports, the muscles in anything we're doing, whether we're drinking a cup of tea or trying to hit a fastball at 90 miles an hour. And so what we're after is trying to get the information that we're processing moving to the middle of the brain and the back of the brain. And when we do that, we're able to access our library of preparation as an athlete. And then if it keeps going to the back of the brain, we're all the subtle muscles of the body start to really become more enlivened, and all the muscles start to fire sequentially, right? So all the work that we've done off the field, preparation, all the things we've learned in life,
Hmm.
we want them to show up when we need them, right? Learning things is great, but it's worthless if we're not able to access it when we need it, right? We want to, crunch time. We want to be able to access our full ability in whatever it is we're our position is in the world, in life.
Is it like I think people are familiar with the concept of muscle memory. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not. It's a term I don't use, because really the muscles don't have the memory. You can train them to do a certain thing, and that's great. But the emotion is stored in the brain. It's stored in the middle of the brain, to go deeper in the basal ganglia of the brain. I call it the library of preparation, right? We learn, we work on all the things that are really, really important to work on. Well, we want to, and those motion stores in the middle of the brain again. We want to be able to access it. So the whole key is to be able to access it. Otherwise, it's kind of hit and miss. It's why slumps occur in sports, right? Years ago, before I really knew what I know now, I was doing a little broadcasting for the Royals on the weekends after my career. And I remember walking into the Chicago White Sox clubhouse. So I was going to do an interview with, I believe, their manager. I can't remember who I was going to interview, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But on the chalkboard, as you walked right into the clubhouse, they were mired in a slump. And the manager had written, "Slumps are part of the game." And I looked at it again, not knowing what I know now, and I said, "No, that doesn't feel right to me. Slumps are not part of the game. Slumps are just a byproduct of the brain body connection not being what we need it to be. There's not hitting on all cylinders, the synapses." And then sure enough, I just kind of went on to gain more interest in this area
Mhm.
through my own healing of head injuries. Believe it or not, I had concussions as a child and even as an adult. And so I've had to learn so much about the brain and the brain body connections and just how to feel good, and how to really cope and exist, in this world. And so I guess I've turned lemons into lemonade, right, as they say.
Yeah, so when was the moment where you took your own, because as you said, when you were going through this sort of in the zone peak experience in 85, you didn't know why. It was just different and it was great and you were performing but you didn't realize why or that maybe it was even happening. When did you go back and say, "Wow, that's what happened to me," and start figuring out like why that might have occurred and sort of turn this into an entrepreneurial pursuit?
Yeah. So one of the things as to why it occurred was I was able to process the fear that I was feeling, in at the time the most effective manner that I could, just by like giving into it, surrendering to it. Um, so that was the first step. And then starting to work with neuroscientists and other people that were, really, understood more about the brain functioning, Dr. Fred Travis, and started to, when I started teaching what I was teaching, I didn't realize really what I was doing, but saw amazing results with athletes. Um, and again, not understanding what I was doing, but we saw my first four professional athletes. Three of them were independently baseball players that I was working with at the time, and another one was a major league slash AAA guy up and down, Nick Green, and they showed an average increase in batting average of 79 points each. And at the end of the season, I said, I looked at the stats. I said, how's that possible, right? How is that possible?
Mhm.
And then I realized, oh, what I was teaching them was how to access the origin of the motion, which is the deeper levels of the brain, and naturally starting to get the neurons to fire in a way that allowed all the muscles to fire synchronistically. And so that just kind of led me to doing a lot more research, and studies. I've now done five studies slash research projects, most of them small sample size, and would like to do one more coming up. Um, but we've really figured out that how to, like spin rate in baseball is such a big deal, revolutions per minute, and so we really understand how to increase spin rate. Obviously, there are many factors to having good spin rate, right? There's strength and arm speed and the proper kinetic chain of the body. But the missing link has been how the brain functions that allows all the muscles to fire synchronistically, that allows that ball to come out of the hand just with the perfect speed and trajectory, like I experienced by chance in the World Series. Yeah, but 20 months later, after the World Series, I was out of the big leagues because I had no idea what happened, no idea how to get back to where I was. The anxiety I felt, trying to repeat what happened to me on a big stage was overwhelming. But again, so we, trying to experience by design what it is sometimes we humans experience by chance, on our quote good days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have these bad days supposedly. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Every day can be pretty darn good. Yeah, and so that's my area of expertise, and love it, and all.
So it strikes me that I mean I've as you and I have talked about, like I my first career out of college was in amateur, college baseball, and known some guys that made careers of baseball, and I got to tell you, not a lot of them are conversant in brain research. So I Uh, what you said you come from a educated fan. Like what'd your parents do? And were you like a science guy growing up? Like it's really interesting to me knowing your background and all the stereotypes I could apply that of all the things for a former big league ball player to be involved in, like brain research and mind body connection and all that seems a little unique.
Well, okay, the truth. Here's the total truth. I don't think I've shared the truth like I'm going to share it now.
All right, here we go.
But I'm very flattered by your assumptions. And I'll share this. My father was a stock and bond broker, had his own business with some partners. I went to Cal Berkeley, very well read, very smart man, knew a lot about a lot. And my mother was from the South, was a nurse, a very caring, loving person. So I was blessed with strong intellect and a woman with a really refined heart.
Hmm.
Me, I fell off a bathroom counter when I was less than a year old, right on the side of my face. I can still feel the tension in my head to this day. Um, and other concussions as a child. Well, we didn't know what concussions were as a child. You
Right,
hit your head, you stop crying. Oh, he's
right,
okay, right? You can go to the doctor.
right.
Well, let me tell you something. I was far from okay, Robin. I had to cheat my way through high school, and I did so and got a 2.65 grade point average.
Hmm.
And somehow I was able to be a pretty good baseball player. I could really field, throw, and run. Was not a good hitter, and somehow managed to be a first round pick in baseball, and somehow survived through the minor leagues, and survived at the major league level for 5 years. Basically by playing a week at a time, and then because of the head injuries, not having the energy or being able to process the stress that
Hmm.
comes with playing a professional sport in the entertainment business on a regular basis. It was very, very, very challenging for me, but scrambled and was able to hang on for five major league seasons, 11 professional. And then, so then it's, from that, my journey began to really learn about the brain and the brain body connection and how one affects the other. It's not just about the brain affecting the body, how the body affects the brain, and all the things that that can interfere with us being, bringing the best version of ourselves to each moment in life, which is what we're always after, whether with our spouse, our kids, or, the people who depend on us in our businesses. And so that's kind of been my driving desire in life.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That's really and I want the listeners to understand, like when Buddy says I was a first round draft pick, that in his world, like that's a unicorn. There's just a handful of these people walking on earth right now that were first round draft picks. Like that is as an amateur, well, as a baseball player, that is being at the pinnacle of hopes and dreams and aspirations. And so it's not that, like it's extra. It's not just that you play professional baseball, you made but to be a first round draft pick is a really big deal. And I'm wondering, as I kind of transition this, and I'm really enjoying learning some of the things that you're sharing, and I'm starting to think about how does this work in my world. Do you think, Buddy, what role do expectations have? Like that just rush of fear, um, like and you as a first round draft pick, I can't even imagine the expectations perhaps that others placed on you and that you placed on yourself. And like what role does that have in the sort of the neuroscience of performance? Like
Yeah,
where does expectations fall into this?
yeah, really fabulous question. There's a saying I love about expectations, that all expectations are a control strategy based on fear.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so
Hmm.
it's easy to walk into a meeting or walk onto the baseball field and really expect to have something happen And really what that does, it creates an energetic block in our system, in our nervous system, that really prevents all the information that's important to us to get to us. Yeah, we're cutting ourselves off, as opposed to remaining in what I call an innocent state of being, to where we really will function, where there's not fear in there, because of the expectation. If all expectations are based on fear, which I believe they are, I know they are, then again, cutting ourselves off. But if we're in this innocent stage, answers can come, ideas can come, right? We're more in tune with the field of all possibilities, and we're in a state of humility. And I always talk about humility, how it's so important. I asked my son the other day, who was a sophomore at the University of Missouri. He got me to jump over a fence at the football game, not to sneak into the game, but to jump over a fence in the parking lot. It wasn't a high fence; it was 3 feet high, and and I just climb and I'm doing my thing to get over it, not like my younger days. And
Right.
he just boom hops over it, and I said, "That's great, Gavin." I said, "Just always remain humble, right? Always remain humble." And I said, "Do you know why it's important to remain humble in life?" And he was like, uh, "No." He says, "But I pray for humility every day." I said, "Well, I love hearing that." I said, "Because if you're not humble, if you think you know, you're cutting yourselves off. There's a block. If you think you know, we're cutting ourselves off
Mm.
energetically. We're going to be less able to hear the messages, to get the ideas that are always flowing, that are there for us to be, to be gotten. Yeah, I said that right, I think. Um, yeah. So, and he said, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense."
Mm.
So preparing, right? Preparing to do our thing, right? And it's always nice to have achievements. Wonderful. It's a beautiful thing. And however, if we're more in this innocent state, especially in the sales world, right? If we're more in this innocent, empathetic state, then there's no resistance in our ability to process what the other person may be saying, you know, for us to handle that objection in the most conducive way to end up getting what we want, is
Mm.
the sale. But we're really more interested in the person in those moments, and really what's best for them,
Yeah.
right? We're in a more authentic state where that person who we're selling to, conversing with, is feeling our authenticity, and they can feel that we're more interested in them than making the sale, than getting our commission. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
No, it makes total sense. It's good. And my son, let's see, he was going into his senior year of college last summer. So he's in grad school now. And I thought it was about time for him to experience some suffering in his life. And so I made him my summer intern and required him to make cold calls. And he has no interest in sales, as a formal profession. But I think again, suffering is good. And part of what I told him, I said, Casey, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I want you to, there's nuances here to what I'm saying, but when you're making cold calls in the context that you're making them, uh, if you and I had trained him like a little talk track, and here's how you start so you don't sound like every, peddler that makes a cold call, that you're different and unique and authentic and all that. But anyway, I said the less you care about what they say on the other end, the better you'll do. And it doesn't mean you're flippant. It doesn't mean you're a clown. It doesn't mean you don't show up professional. But the less you care about the outcome, the
Yeah.
more it frees you up to do your process.
Yes.
And I think I heard some of that
Yeah.
in what you were
Absolutely.
saying, buddy.
Wow. Your son is very lucky to have a father providing that advice at such a young age. You're absolutely right, because what I call the power of detachment is so powerful. And when we see it in sports, it's crazy how there's a big difference between being 99% detached when it pertains to how the muscles function, and being 100% detached. It's not
Mm.
just like 1%, it's like big.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right that the power of detachment is really, really a big thing. And unfortunately, our subconscious really can control our life, and that comes into play in those defining moments of a sales call or a big at bat or making a big pitch in a baseball game or on
Yeah.
the golf course, right? I do a lot of work in golf, right? And
Yeah.
there's no better game than golf to master yourself in life, is what I like to say, because there's very little margin for error, and
Yeah.
the subtleties in our physiology, really come into play, and we understand how powerful they are, and how powerful, as you said, the detachment can be. Great advice for your son, Casey.
Yeah. I want to ask you, go back, and then I want to just a couple more. I know we're getting close to time here, but when you said there's literally when you said there was a blockage, like is that like a literal blockage that like you could see on like an fMRI, or is that
No.
conceptual, or what's the science behind? Because that's really fascinating, because that's exactly what happens is
Yeah.
it's as if, when you're not, you told you were talking about Gavin and hopping the fence and like be humble, because if you're not humble, like, can you go a little deeper on that? That's fascinating.
Yeah. Just a concept, it's nothing that could be shown on the fMRI, but yeah, it's an energetic block. We're just not aware of what we're not aware of until we are, right? And we just don't know. We don't know. We can't see what we can't see, and until you start to really realize how energy works, and how the subtle energies are so powerful. And so, really being able to transmute that energy, to really move it, so that we're freed up to to be more of our authentic self, and be able to respond in right in the moment, at a critical moment, whatever it is we're doing, whether we're driving a race car, or again hitting a baseball, or making a sales call, right?
Yeah. Do your clients find, because of this sense of, I don't know, timelessness or ease or whatever, comfort, do you find that when you work with folks to train them in the work that you do, do athletes have fewer injuries and like better recovery? I mean, it almost seems like that would go together. Have you seen that?
Oh, 100%, you bet. We've had an incredible success of keeping pitchers free of arm injuries, and not just arm injuries, but and all clients free of oblique injuries. Years ago, at a time where I just started teaching what I was teaching, and injuries in baseball with baseball pitchers were skyrocketing. Tommy John surgeries with elbow problems, and I started to realize that my professional amateur pitchers were not getting hurt at a time when there's so many injuries, and I'm thinking, geez, I wonder why that is. And then I realized, well, what's happening with what we teach through the brain is that all the muscles are firing sequentially, synchronistically. So there's less strain on the ligaments and tendons. And that led me to doing, my first really big time study at the American Sports Medicine Institute, which was very, very successful. That showed much less arm discomfort, and shoulder discomfort, much less fatigue, et cetera. Many positive things. Nobody had a negative experience in that study, and it led to more EMG work, where we measured the muscle activity. And what we found was, with pitchers, there was a reduction in the lat back here and an increase in the pec. And the orthopedic surgeon who analyzed the research said it shows more support for the shoulder and the elbow. So that's the reason that we've been
Wow.
very successful in keeping pitchers free of arm injuries. It's been really cool to see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it makes sense when you think about it. I never really thought about it until you were speaking earlier. Okay, so I'm listening to the podcast, love what I'm hearing, really interesting. I can't go to Kansas City to work with Buddy, but I'm an amateur golfer. I want to be better. So for someone like that, like just hearing like, and I'm not talking about like giving away the secrets, but like what are a couple of just practical things for someone listening in today that's maybe a weekend golfer, that's probably a good canvas to talk about. Like, what are some things they could do to maybe enter into this zone type experience, or at least begin to not let fear and anxiety and nervousness and emotions cripple their best performance?
Yeah, really great question. First off, the understanding the mechanics, right? Going to a swing coach, right? I'm not a swing coach. I'm not a substitute for a swing coach. So making sure that they understand the proper mechanics. One, and then really being aware of their emotional state and not running away from it. Like I used to run away and grab the sandwich, but was forced to sit at my locker to just allow that energy to move. So there is nothing more important than that. Highly suggest that. And then from there, we go to the brain and try and distract the brain somewhat to start to strengthen the neural pathways through many different techniques and drills and all is what we do. But yeah, being with the emotional body and not fearing what it is you're feeling. The state of acceptance and allowance is
Mm.
so important. Really accepting and allowing for what it is that you're feeling to be there and not run away from it.
Yeah, that's good. So when I'm over a 4 foot putt to save my par and prevent a bogey, I just assume I've already missed it. And that in a weird, magical way, that frees me up to make a good stroke on the
Yeah,
ball.
you're you're detaching from the desired result.
I guess. I guess I don't think that's healthy. I don't actually think that's healthy. But hey, tell folks who, because we've got listeners from all over. Tell folks if they want to find out more. I know you've written a book uh, back in I think 2010 in my
Yeah,
research I saw, and I
I have
don't
a
know.
new one coming out probably early next year.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So what's it about? What's the working title?
It's the art of the zone. Really going to really simplify the entire zone experience is what we're doing.
Nice. So you
Yeah.
think it'll be out early next year?
Yes.
All right, I will. You're going to sell at least one copy.
There you go. Great.
Yeah,
Wonderful,
that's
Rob.
awesome. No, I look forward to that. Tell folks where they can find you, where they can keep up with you, some of the work you're doing, learn more. Take some time and tell folks how to track you down.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Zonemotion.com. And then I don't do a lot on social media. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I love LinkedIn. I just did well, that's where you and I met.
Yep.
Such a great platform. I've met so many wonderful, good, helpful people. I'm on Instagram, don't do a lot. Twitter a little bit. So that's where they can find me.
Okay, awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes. So if you're listening, you can go over to the show notes if you're driving or moving around and you can't write it down. So, buddy, thanks a bunch. This was fun. I'm really glad to meet you face to face via Zoom here and talk to you. And I think what you're doing is, I think it's fascinating. I think people, like, there are a lot of potentially great performers, people who have all the attributes, the skill sets, the competencies, the desire. And I think sometimes people want it so badly that I love that concept. I got to get my arms around it a little more, but that concept of just blocking themselves. Like, I think sometimes that try hard gene actually makes it harder to be successful. And in the coaching that I do with clients, that comes up more than folks might imagine. So I love what you're doing, and I love how you talk about it. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was in a meeting the other day with a Major League Baseball team, and I said to them, I said that the days of grinding your way to the big leagues are over.
yeah,
It's not going to happen anymore.
yeah,
And they kind of said, yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying. So yeah, but
yeah.
great to
So
meet you,
it's
Robin.
yeah. So thanks again, buddy, and let's stay in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.